In 1560, a warlord walked into a meeting room where 23 clan leaders sat waiting. They were loud, aggressive, competing for attention, each one trying to prove their strength through words, through posturing, through dominance displays that filled the room with noise. And then he walked in, Tokugawa Ieyasu, age 18, controlled only a small, poor province, had fewer soldiers than anyone in that room, had less wealth, less power, less reputation. He didn't announce himself, didn't demand respect, didn't raise his voice. He sat down in the corner, said nothing, watched. The other warlords barely noticed him. They dismissed him as weak, irrelevant, beneath their attention. One of them, a powerful daimyo named Imagawa Yoshimoto, even mocked him openly, saying, "Why is this child even here? He has nothing to offer." Ieyasu didn't respond, didn't defend himself, didn't react. He just sat there, quiet, watching, learning. The meeting ended. The warlords left, laughing, confident, loud, and Ieyasu returned to his province and began planning. 40 years later, in 1600, every single one of those warlords was dead. Their clans were destroyed. Their provinces were conquered. Their names are forgotten. Except one. Tokugawa Ieyasu stood as shogun of all Japan, absolute ruler, unquestioned power, a dynasty that would last 268 years. The loud ones who had mocked him, dead within a decade. The aggressive ones who had dismissed him, crushed in battles they never saw coming. The confident ones who had underestimated him, destroyed by a man they thought was weak, because they made one fatal mistake. They confused silence with weakness. They confused quiet with inability. They confused stillness with defeat. And by the time they realized what Ieyasu actually was, it was too late. Because here's what nobody tells you about quiet people. They're not quiet because they're weak. They're quiet because they're calculating. They're not silent because they have nothing to say. They're silent because they're listening to everything you're saying. They're not still because they're afraid. They're still because they're waiting for the perfect moment to move. And when they move, you won't see it coming. And today, you're going to discover exactly why the quiet ones are the most dangerous people you'll ever meet. Here's the thing about loud people that makes them feel powerful. Noise commands attention. When someone walks into a room and dominates the conversation, your brain interprets that as strength. When someone speaks with absolute confidence, even if they're wrong, your brain assumes they know something you don't. When someone makes bold claims, loud declarations, aggressive moves, your brain registers that as power. And most of the time, you're right. Loud people do have power. Confidence does create influence. Aggression does win battles. But there's a ceiling to that power. And quiet people operate above it. In 1582, Oda Nobunaga was the loudest, most aggressive, most dominant warlord in Japan. He announced his plans publicly. He made bold declarations. He crushed his enemies with overwhelming force and made sure everyone knew about it. He was loud, confident, unstoppable, and everyone feared him, including a quiet general named Akechi Mitsuhide. Mitsuhide never challenged Nobunaga publicly, never argued, never made bold declarations. He just served, quietly, obediently. Nobunaga trusted him completely, because loud people always underestimate quiet ones. And on June 21st, 1582, while Nobunaga was staying at Honnoji Temple in Kyoto, Mitsuhide made his move. No warning, no announcement, no dramatic declaration. He surrounded the temple with 13,000 soldiers and set it on fire. Nobunaga, the loudest, most powerful man in Japan, died trapped inside, killed by the quiet man he'd underestimated for 20 years. This is the noise trap. Loud people broadcast their intentions. They signal their moves. They announce their plans. And that feels powerful. But it's also a vulnerability, because while everyone is watching the loud person, the quiet person is watching everyone. While the loud person is demanding attention, the quiet person is gathering information. While the loud person is making moves, the quiet person is planning the perfect counter-move. And when the quiet person strikes, The loud person never sees it coming. Modern psychology confirms this. A 2017 study from Princeton University found that people who speak less in group settings retain 40% more information than people who dominate conversations. Why? Because when you're talking, you're broadcasting. When you're silent, you're absorbing. Loud people are so focused on being heard that they miss what everyone else is saying. Quiet people hear everything, and information is power. Dr. Susan Cain, author of Quiet, the Power of Introverts, put it this way: the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. They're just the most obvious. Real power operates in silence because it doesn't need to announce itself. This is why loud people feel powerful, but quiet people are dangerous. Loud people control the room. Quiet people control the game. So if noise isn't real power, what is? Observation, patience, strategic silence. The samurai had a concept for this, metsuke. It means the watching eye. The warrior who masters metsuke doesn't react to what's happening in the moment. He watches, he studies, he learns patterns. And then, when everyone else is distracted, he moves. Tokugawa Ieyasu practiced metsuke for his entire life. In 1560, when he sat in that room with 23 warlords, he wasn't weak. He was watching. He watched how Imagawa Yoshimoto made decisions based on pride. He watched how Takeda Shingen prioritized aggression over strategy. He watched how Oda Nobunaga trusted loud displays of loyalty over quiet competence. He learned every warlord's weakness, and then he waited for 40 years. While everyone else fought loud, public wars, Ieyasu built alliances in silence. While everyone else made bold declarations, Ieyasu made quiet moves. While everyone else demanded immediate power, Ieyasu played the long game. And in 1600, at the Battle of Sekigahara, he defeated every rival in a single day. Not because he was the strongest, because he'd spent 40 years watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment. Here's the formula quiet people understand. First, silence forces others to reveal themselves. When you're quiet, people fill the silence. They talk more than they should. They reveal information they should keep hidden. They expose weaknesses they don't even know they have. Ieyasu never dominated conversations. He asked questions. He listened. He let others talk. And every word they said gave him more information to use against them later. Second, patience allows you to strike at the perfect moment. Loud people move when they feel ready. Quiet people move when their enemy is weakest. Akechi Mitsuhide didn't attack Oda Nobunaga when Nobunaga was surrounded by armies. He attacked when Nobunaga was alone, unguarded, at a temple in the middle of the night. One strike. Perfectly timed. Game over. Third, stillness creates unpredictability. Loud people are predictable. You know what they want. You know how they'll react. Quiet people are ghosts. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're planning. You don't know when they'll move. And that uncertainty is terrifying. When Tokugawa Ieyasu sat silent in that meeting room, the other warlords had no idea if he was weak, indifferent, or plotting. That uncertainty made him impossible to predict. And unpredictability is the ultimate weapon. This is why the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Not because they're hiding, because they're watching, waiting, and calculating. And when they move, it's already too late to stop them. Okay, so how do you actually become this person? Not vague advice, exact steps. The same system Tokugawa Ieyasu used to go from dismissed teenager to shogun of Japan. Level 1 is master observation. Learn to watch. Start by shutting up. Ieyasu spent entire meetings saying nothing. He watched body language. He listened to tone. He studied who spoke to whom, who interrupted, who deferred. Your version is this. In every conversation, every meeting, every social interaction, speak 50% less than you normally would. When someone asks your opinion, pause for 3 seconds before responding. When someone makes a claim, don't immediately agree or disagree. Just nod. Let them keep talking. Why this works is simple. When you stop talking, you start noticing things you've been missing your entire life. You notice who's lying, who's insecure, who's pretending, who's actually dangerous, and that information becomes your advantage. Time frame is 30 days. Every single day, practice speaking less and observing more. Level 2 is build strategic patience. Learn to wait. Ieyasu didn't strike the moment he saw an opening. He waited until his enemies were exhausted, distracted, and overconfident. Your version is this. When you see an opportunity, whether it's a business deal, a confrontation, a decision, don't take it immediately. Wait 24 hours. Watch what happens. See if the situation changes. When someone provokes you, don't react. Stay silent. Let them wonder what you're thinking. When someone expects you to move, stay still. Why this works is because patience makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability makes you dangerous. When people can't predict your moves, they can't prepare for them. And when you finally move, they're caught completely off guard. Time frame is 60 days. Practice delaying reactions, responses, and decisions. Level 3 is strike with precision. Learn to move decisively. This is the hardest part. Quiet people don't just watch and wait forever. They watch and wait until the perfect moment. And then they strike with devastating precision. Ieyasu waited 40 years. But when he moved at Sekigahara, he didn't hesitate. He didn't second guess. He committed fully. Your version is this. After 60 days of observation and patience, identify one moment where you have maximum advantage. One conversation where you know more than everyone else. One decision where you've seen all the variables. One move where your opponent is completely vulnerable. And then move. Fully, decisively, without hesitation. Why this works is because you've been watching, you know exactly when to strike. Because you've been patient, your opponent doesn't see it coming. Because you move with full commitment, there's no defense. Time frame is 90 days total. Observe for 30, wait for 60, strike at 90. This is how you become dangerously quiet. Not by being passive, not by being weak. By mastering the art of silence, patience, and perfectly timed action. Here's the problem most people face. They try to be quiet, but their mind rebels. They feel uncomfortable in silence. They feel pressure to fill gaps in conversation. They feel weak when they don't immediately respond. So how do you train yourself to embrace silence? Training 1 is practice comfortable silence. Exposure therapy. Ieyasu trained himself to sit in silence for hours during Zen meditation. This wasn't relaxation. It was training his mind to be comfortable with stillness. Your version is this. Every morning, sit in complete silence for 10 minutes. No phone, no music, no distractions, just you and your thoughts. At first, your mind will scream at you to do something, say something, move, ignore it. Over time, silence becomes natural instead of uncomfortable. Why this works is simple. If you can't handle silence alone, you can't handle silence in front of others. This training makes silence your default state instead of something you force. Training 2 is delay your reactions. Impulse control. Ieyasu never reacted immediately to anything. When insulted, he paused. When praised, he paused. When threatened, he paused. This pause gave him control. Your practice is this. When someone says something that triggers you, anger, excitement, fear, count to 5 before responding. When someone asks you a question, pause for 3 seconds before answering. Train your brain. You control your reactions. Your reactions don't control you. Why this works is because immediate reactions reveal your weaknesses. Delayed reactions reveal nothing. And when people can't read you, they can't manipulate you. Training 3 is study people like experiments. Detached observation. Ieyasu watched warlords the way scientists watch lab rats. He didn't judge them. He didn't react emotionally. He just studied patterns. Your version is this. Pick 3 people in your life. Watch them for 30 days. Notice what triggers them, what they talk about most, what they avoid, who they defer to, who they dismiss. Write it down. Track patterns. Don't use this information yet. Just collect it. Why this works is when you study people without emotional attachment, you see things others miss. You see the fear behind the confidence, the insecurity behind the aggression, the weakness behind the power, and that information becomes leverage. These three training methods don't make you quiet, they make you dangerous. Even with the method and training, you'll face resistance, not from others, from yourself. Obstacle 1 is if I'm quiet, people will think I'm weak. This is fear of judgment. You've been conditioned to believe that silence equals weakness, but history proves otherwise. Tokugawa Ieyasu was dismissed as weak for 40 years, and then he became shogun. The warlords who mocked him, dead. The ones who underestimated him, destroyed. The lesson is this: let them think you're weak. That's your advantage. When people underestimate you, they stop watching you. And when they stop watching you, you can move freely. Obstacle 2 is if I don't speak up, I'll miss opportunities. This is fear of irrelevance. You think if you're not loud, you won't be noticed. But that's not how power works. Oda Nobunaga was loud. He seized every opportunity immediately, and he died at 49, betrayed by a quiet man he'd ignored. Tokugawa Ieyasu was silent. He let opportunities pass, and he lived to 73, died as shogun, and founded a dynasty that lasted 268 years. The lesson is, you don't need every opportunity. You need the right opportunity, and you can only identify the right opportunity if you're watching instead of talking. Obstacle 3 is staying quiet feels like lying. This is moral discomfort. You feel like silence is dishonest, manipulative, wrong. Your brain tells you that withholding information is the same as deceiving someone, that letting people believe false assumptions about you is unethical, that real integrity requires constant transparency. But that's not how power works, and it's definitely not how survival works. Silence isn't lying, it's simply not volunteering information. There's a massive difference between actively deceiving someone and passively allowing them to deceive themselves. When you lie, you create a false reality. When you stay silent, you let others create their own reality based on their assumptions. And if their assumptions are wrong, that's not your responsibility. That's their failure of perception. Ieyasu never lied. Historical records confirm this. He never made false claims about his strength, never pretended to have armies he didn't have, never fabricated alliances that didn't exist. He just didn't correct people's assumptions about him. When they thought he was weak, he let them think it. When powerful warlords dismissed him as irrelevant, he didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to prove his worth. He just stayed quiet and let them believe whatever they wanted to believe. When they thought he was afraid, he didn't demonstrate courage. He let them interpret his silence as fear. When they thought he was passive, he didn't reveal his plans. He let them assume passivity meant inability. He didn't deceive them, he just didn't educate them. And that's the critical distinction most people miss. You're not responsible for correcting other people's assumptions. If someone looks at you and decides you're weak, that's their judgment. If someone observes your silence and interprets it as incompetence, that's their conclusion. If someone sees your stillness and assumes you're harmless, that's their mistake. And their mistake becomes your advantage. Because while they're underestimating you, you're watching them. While they're dismissing you, you're learning their weaknesses. While they're ignoring you, you're planning their defeat. This is exactly what Ieyasu did for 40 years. He let every powerful warlord in Japan underestimate him, and one by one, he outlived them all. The lesson is simple but brutal. If they underestimate you, don't correct them. Let them stay blind. Let them stay comfortable in their false assumptions. Let them believe you're not a threat, because the moment they realize you are, they'll start watching you. They'll start preparing for you. They'll start building defenses against you. But if they never see you as dangerous, they'll leave themselves completely exposed. And when you finally move, there's nothing they can do to stop you. These obstacles will appear. Your mind will use them to justify speaking up, reacting, revealing yourself. You'll feel pressure to prove yourself when someone dismisses you. You'll feel tempted to respond when someone underestimates you. You'll feel morally uncomfortable staying silent when someone makes false assumptions about you. Expect these feelings. They're not signs that you're doing something wrong. They're signs that you're doing something difficult. Recognize them, name them, understand where they come from. These are evolutionary responses designed to protect your social status in tribal environments. But you're not living in a tribe anymore. You're operating in a competitive world where revealing your capabilities prematurely gets you eliminated. Refuse them. When the urge to speak up appears, pause, count to 10. Ask yourself, what do I gain by correcting this person's assumption? What do I lose by staying silent? In almost every case, you gain nothing by speaking and lose everything by revealing yourself too early, because silence isn't weakness. It's the deadliest weapon you'll ever have. It's the weapon Tokugawa Ieyasu used to conquer Japan. It's the weapon Akechi Mitsuhide used to kill Oda Nobunaga. It's the weapon every truly dangerous person throughout history has mastered. And it's the weapon most people never learn to use because their ego can't tolerate being underestimated. Tokugawa Ieyasu died in 1616 at age 73. Not in battle, not from assassination, from natural causes in his bed, surrounded by his family, after living longer than virtually every rival he'd ever faced. He lived longer than every warlord who had mocked him in that meeting room in 1560. Every single one of those loud, confident, aggressive men who had dismissed him as weak, who had laughed at him, who had treated him as irrelevant, died before him, and most of them died violently, suddenly, destroyed by enemies they never saw coming or allies they trusted too much. He outlived Oda Nobunaga, who died at 49. Nobunaga, the loudest, most aggressive, most dominant warlord in Japan, the man who announced every plan, who made every move publicly, who demanded recognition for every victory. Betrayed and killed by a quiet general he'd underestimated for 20 years. Burned alive in a temple because he was so focused on being seen as powerful that he stopped watching who was watching him. He outlived Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who died at 61. Hideyoshi, who rose from peasant to ruler through bold moves and loud declarations, who built an empire through aggression and died leaving that empire to a 5-year-old son who couldn't defend it. Within 3 years of Hideyoshi's death, Ieyasu had dismantled everything Hideyoshi built. He outlived Takeda Shingen, who died at 53. Shingen, the Tiger of Kai, who fought wars for 30 years and died on campaign, his body failing from decades of constant warfare. Shingen, who chose aggression and exhausted himself before his enemies did. He outlived them all. Every loud warlord, every aggressive daimyo, every confident leader who believed strength meant being seen, being heard, being feared openly. They all died while Ieyasu quietly waited, watched, and planned. And he didn't just outlive them, he conquered them. Not through aggression, Ieyasu fought fewer major battles than any of his rivals. Not through loudness, Ieyasu made fewer public declarations than any other warlord of his era. Not through bold declarations, Ieyasu rarely announced his intentions until after he'd already achieved them. He conquered through silence, through patience, through perfectly timed moves that no one saw coming, through 40 years of being underestimated while he quietly built alliances, studied weaknesses, and waited for the exact right moment to strike. And when he finally moved at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, the war was over in a single day. Not because he had the biggest army, because he'd spent 40 years positioning himself so perfectly that when he finally committed, there was no possible defense. And when he finally became shogun in 1603, he didn't celebrate loudly. There were no grand victory parades, no public speeches about his greatness, no demands for recognition or worship. He didn't make grand speeches. He didn't tour the country accepting praise. He didn't commission monuments to himself. He didn't demand public recognition. He just quietly went to work. He just quietly consolidated power. eliminated rivals one by one without dramatic announcements, restructured the government without public debate. He quietly eliminated threats. Anyone who might challenge his rule disappeared silently, efficiently, without creating martyrs or rallying points for opposition. He quietly built a system so strong that his family ruled Japan for 268 years after his death. The Tokugawa shogunate lasted from 1603 to 1868. 15 generations, nearly 3 centuries of uninterrupted power, all because one man understood that real power doesn't announce itself. The loud warlords? Forgotten within a generation. Oda Nobunaga is remembered as a cautionary tale. Toyotomi Hideyoshi's empire lasted 5 years after his death. Takeda Shingen's clan was destroyed within a decade of his passing. All that noise, all that aggression, all that demand for recognition resulted in empires that collapsed the moment their founders died. Because loud power is always personal. It depends on the individual's presence, voice, force of personality. And when that person dies, the power dies with them. The quiet shogun? Remembered for centuries. Not just remembered, revered, studied. His strategies are still taught in military academies today. His political system defined Japan for almost 300 years. His legacy outlived him by centuries because he built power into systems, not personalities. Here's the truth most people never accept. Loudness gets attention. When you walk into a room and dominate the conversation, people notice. When you make bold claims and aggressive moves, people pay attention. When you demand recognition, you receive it, temporarily. Silence gets power. When you walk into a room and say nothing, people ignore you. And while they're ignoring you, you're gathering information they're giving away freely. When you make quiet moves, no one prepares a defense. When you build strength in silence, no one knows to stop you until it's already too late. Noise makes you obvious. Everyone knows what the loud person wants. Everyone knows what they're planning. Everyone knows their weaknesses because they broadcast them constantly. The person who talks the most reveals the most. About their fears, their insecurities, their strategies, their vulnerabilities. They can't help it. Talking is revealing. Quiet makes you dangerous. No one knows what you're thinking. No one knows what you're planning. No one knows when you'll move or how or why. That uncertainty is terrifying. Unpredictability is the ultimate weapon because it makes defense impossible. You can't prepare for what you can't predict. And the person who talks the most in the room is never the one who wins the game. They might win the conversation. They might win the immediate interaction. They might feel powerful in the moment, but they never win the long game. Because while they're talking, the quiet one is watching, learning patterns, identifying weaknesses, building a complete psychological profile. While they're reacting, the quiet one is planning, calculating probabilities, identifying optimal timing, preparing moves 3 steps ahead. While they're demanding respect, the quiet one is earning fear, not loud fear, not obvious fear, the deep, uncomfortable fear that comes from not knowing what someone is capable of. So here's the choice you have to make right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. You can be loud. You can walk into every room demanding attention. You can dominate every conversation. You can make bold moves and loud declarations. You can make sure everyone knows your plans, your thoughts, your capabilities, and you'll feel powerful. People will notice you. People will react to you. People will acknowledge you for a while, until someone quiet has been watching you long enough to know exactly how to destroy you. Until someone who never said a word has learned every pattern you follow, every weakness you have, every mistake you make repeatedly. Until someone you dismissed as irrelevant makes one perfectly timed move that eliminates you completely.